What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today, yes, we are dropping the NNBS, and we have a ton of stuff going on. I'm going to show you here in just a second, but before we get to that, guys, TWAmotorsports.com is live. I will put a link in the video description down below, guys. You can get hats, you can get shirts, hoodies, key tags, stickers, got several things on there, so go check it out. Sock hats, scullies, hoodies, I don't know. I've named a bunch of stuff, but either way, go check it out. I'm also listing some of the stuff that I've got for sale on there right now. I've only got the Yukon listed unless it sells between now and when I post this video. But either way, let's get to what we are going to be doing today, and that is dropping the NNBS. And guys, this is probably the most parts I've ever put on something at one time, and mainly the reason is because of the mileage on the truck. The truck is a 200,000 mile truck. And to me, I think you should replace a lot more stuff than just dropping it. Can you do it on the cheap? Yes. Are we doing it on the cheap? No. So this is everything we are going to be putting on this truck. And you're seeing some stuff that normally you wouldn't see. Obviously the drop kit is, you know, majority of this stuff here, but look, ball joints I'm sure are trashed. The bushings I'm sure are trashed. It's just cheaper to buy, and it's way less time to buy an upper and lower control arm. Guys, I will be listing all of this stuff in the description as well. I am a big fan of McGaughy's when it comes to drops on whether it be like the green NBS back there or the NNBS. Now look, I like the RideTech stuff a lot, but I wasn't going to splurge and spend that money on this truck. Yeah, it's a 6-cylinder truck. So either way, this stuff works really well. I've used it in the past. I've actually used this exact kit on another truck. An NNBS, and I love the way it rode. But let's go through what we've got here. We've got upper and lower A-arms. We've got new tie rod ends, only the outers. I'm not going to replace the inners. We've got new hubs. Guys, I have an ABS light on because of a bad hub in the front, so we're going to replace those. Those get a lot of wear in them too. I think it's a good thing to replace. We've got some energy suspension sway bar end links. We've got a notch from McGaughy's, which I'm going to start there. We've got helper bags because my son is using this to haul the lawnmower around. We've got new struts for the front, shocks for the back. We've got shock relocators. We have saddles for the flip kit. Obviously, this is all part of the flip kit here. Obviously, we got a 2-inch drop spindle for the front. And then, guys, we will not be using these pieces here. This kit is adjustable from like 3 in the front, 5 in the back, to 5 in the front, 7 in the back. And that is what those are. Those are rear shackle mounts, and we will not be using those. We're literally just flipping the axle and using the stock hanger. Should give us about 7 inches in the back. We may go to a 6-inch down the road. I don't know. We'll just have to see once we get it all together. But as you can see, the truck's not in here. My son actually is daily driving it. So we are sneaking this video through as he daily drives it. I'm going to start with the C-notches. You really don't have to have a C-notch if you're using a helper bag. I don't want any complaints about getting a trailer on there, getting the back full of lawn mowing equipment, and it hitting the frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the C-notch now. Normally, guys, I would want to do a weld-in C-notch, but for the purpose of doing it here in the shop, I don't have a welder. I need to get one, but this is all the stuff we're going to be using. Like I said, I'll list it in the description. Let's get that thing in here and get started. So we started by getting it off the ground. We've got the jack stands under the frame. I've relaxed this jack even though it's still under the rear end. And guys, we have a cutout, and this guy's supposed to go right here. Now, I've got it backwards here, but this V right here that you see goes in the center of this bed rail. And we have to fold this over, and then we're gonna use this as our template to cut, because we're gonna have to cut this out, obviously, to make room for the frame rail. Now I'm going to show you guys bits and pieces of this. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. You've seen me lower several things, but I'm just going to kind of cut in and out as I go. I'm not going to show you the cutting part because it wrecks my camera. But we need to bend along this dotted line here to make sure that it's where it needs to be. You can see it says front. Obviously, this is the back. Since we're on the passenger side, we'll have to flip it around to do the front. So let's get it marked and start cutting. I'm going to use a die grinder on my DeWalt cordless grinder. Or a cutoff wheel on my DeWalt cordless grinder. Let me tell you what's a little bit awkward. Look at where that cutout is. We're gonna have to actually trim some of this off in order to make this happen. But yeah, it sets it back a little bit. But if you remember, this is centered in that bed rail. And I'm looking at the pictures, and sure enough, we're just gonna have to trim it a little bit differently than what I'm used to. So I've got it marked. Let's go get the cutting wheel and let's get this thing knocked off. I'm probably gonna go through the front and then partially through the bottom, and then we'll work our way through the back, because it is all the way through. Like it's a boxed frame, unlike the older ones where it's like a C-channel. So we're gonna have quite a bit of cutting to do here. Once we got that cut out, you can see we've got our notch up in place, and we need to drill some holes, guys. And I like to mark these with, I really would like to leave it here, but I'm gonna mark it in case it moves. Got it up, it's up against the bottom, it's up against this. We've got a good cut. Looks pretty good. So I'm gonna grab my center punch. We are going to drill some holes. I'm gonna have to mark that one since I ground there. I'm gonna start with a little drill bit and we'll work our way up. Once we get all our holes drilled, and I was just using a stepped drill bit, the kit comes with this. So we need to try to thread it back behind and line up our holes. And then we can get our C-notch up into place and start tightening it down. Here's the deal, guys. There's two holes that go here and here, but I want to tighten it down where it's nice and firm before I mark those holes and drill that second set of holes. So you're going to drill two more here and two more on the bottom side. So let's get this guy up into place, run it down snug, and then we'll mark those bottom holes. You can see we got this thing bolted all in. So now we can mark those bottom holes, get those drilled, and I'll show you the plate that goes in there. Once we get those holes drilled in the bottom down there, we have this plate with the welded on nut, and it fits pretty snug in there. And actually, guys, it kind of helps hold this forward. It's the same depth or width as the frame. And I was kind of curious, like, how am I gonna keep this in place? But I don't think we're gonna have too many issues, to be real honest with you. So now all we gotta do is put the plate back in, snug down these outer ones. I think there's a torque spec I'll look at, and then these come up from the bottom. Got everything snugged up. It's actually 75 foot-pounds is what all these torque to. The only other thing I did that I didn't show you guys is I screwed the bump stop in the middle. There's a threaded insert that comes with the bump stop. Just screw that up in the middle. Now let's go knock out the other side, which I won't show you guys, and we will be ready to start on the actual drop. That gives us, you know, another what, 3 inches, 2.5 inches of clearance. I know the bump stop sets there, but you know, it'll compress, and we're gonna have the helper bags to help also. Now you'll notice that I've got this thing flipped around now. I did the one side on one night. This side I actually just finished with. This side, guys, you do have to undo a couple things in order to give you some clearance that you need to cut. I figured I should talk about that real quick. Two 13 millimeters that hold the bracket up here up top to push those brake lines back. And then this guy right here is a 13 millimeter, and that is to hold your e-brake cable. So I'm gonna leave those unhooked because we're gonna need those out of the way anyway. So at this point, we're gonna get under here and we're gonna take the shocks loose. They should be a 21 millimeter, so you're gonna need a 21 wrench on one side, obviously a socket on the other, and then up top it's a cage nut, so all you need is a 21 millimeter up top. We're gonna get those out of the way, and then we are going to use the 21 to also get our U-bolts off. Ooh, that's gonna be close because look, those are long. I think we'll be able to get them. Got the shocks loose, got the U-bolts loose. I went ahead and loosened the 21 millimeter here and the one up above. You guys can see that. Both of these on that rear shackle. The other thing, guys, I didn't show you this because it's going to depend on what you have. It should be 21 millimeters to take the hitch out. The problem was this is an aftermarket, so it's not 21 millimeters. It was like 3/4 and 7/8 and just a hodgepodge. So either way, at this point, we've got everything loose. Like the rear end is not touching the leaf springs. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this 21 out on both sides. I'm going to completely remove the leaf spring out of that side, so the passenger side. The driver's side, I'm not going to take the tank down, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But what I am going to have to do is I'm going to have to take a 15/16 and loosen that front bolt in order to get this thing kind of where we need it. So that's the next step. I took the 21 out and I pulled the back of the leaf spring over the pocket back here and pulled it out. Now, something I was not expecting, it didn't get, and so I'm gonna have to get some, this is a factory out of a like NBS truck. So is this one. This is like a lift shackle, they call them. This thing had drop shackles in it. Well, that's not going to work. That's going to put us too low. And look at the bushing right here. It's absolutely trash. So I'm going to get some new factory ones here because this is going to give us 7 inches. If I put these back in, not to mention they're broke, but I don't want to do that. So we're going to be replacing those. But on the other side, we took the leaf spring completely out because we have the ability to get back behind. Kind of got to push the muffler over a little, get the bolts out, and we've got this one laying on the ground. Now, we're going to have to do a couple things here. Obviously, we're going to put new shackles on. I haven't taken this one off yet. But we need to take this plate off and we need to reverse this pin. This should be a 15 millimeter. But before we do that, we need to clamp it together. Obviously, on the other side, we're going to have to do that in the truck, which is not a big deal. We have enough room to do that. Just may be a little more cumbersome with the rear end right there. But either way, I'm going to do that next. I'll kind of show you guys this setup because we need to clamp that leaf pack down before we do it. Now, it's a little easier, obviously, on the one that's out of the truck. But on this one, I've got my vice grips on the bottom to hold it from spinning. 15 millimeter on top, and then you can see we have the leaf springs clamped together because once we remove this, it's going to be kind of wanting to move around and your leaf springs disconnect, and we don't want that. We want to keep them together. So I'm going to go ahead, take it out, flip it over, put it right back in. You can see I got it out of there. It actually wasn't as bad as the rest of the truck, but we do need to take this guy off, set it aside. We will not be reusing it, and then we just need to put this back into place. You may have to use a hammer to kind of tap it down. And that is it, guys. Now we will get the nut back on the bottom side. I don't know the torque spec on this. I just run it down with my impact. Here's where you're gonna need a little bit of help. After we've got those rotated, I already did that on both sides. The other one, obviously, guys, is easier because, well, the leaf spring's sitting on the ground. But we need to pull this leaf spring back down. I put it back up in the pocket to give me some room. We need to push this rear end towards the passenger side. This is what's going to keep me from having to actually take the leaf spring off on this side because I don't want to drop the gas tank to do it. So what I generally do is with that leaf spring out on that side and the rear end kind of tilted up, you can see we've got it rocked down on the ground. We're going to push this thing over as far as we can, feeling comfortable with the brake lines. Now remember, we have them unhooked up top here, so that gives us an additional amount of room to move over. But watch that, you know, don't kink your brake lines doing this. We just got to get it over a little bit. This will come out. As a matter of fact, let's show you here what I'm talking about. You can see we have a little bit of movement out with this guy. At the same time, we're going over with the rear end, if that makes sense. Once we get that swung around the bottom, then we're going to lift it back up, put the leaf spring back underneath, and we can put our shackle in place with the bolt and set it back up in the pocket. That is a workout. I really, guys, I've done this by myself before, but Cohen's out here helping me, and it's like, I don't know how I did it by myself. That's for sure. Anyway, we got it. The leaf spring on the bottom side. It wants to catch everything here. I think it's a little easier if you have disc brakes, but anyway, we've got the leaf spring on the bottom. Obviously, the other one we can just place in the bottom, which does make life easier. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get my new shackle put in. We're gonna put the bolt in that. We're not gonna tighten it up. We're just gonna snug it down, get it swung up in here. We're gonna put the leaf spring on the other side, and then we will worry about the actual saddles and how we're gonna position all this. We now have both the leaf springs in. I don't know if you guys can see the one on the other side with new shackles that I got. Those are actually from Dorman. I'll list that in the parts down below as well. So, really, guys, what we need to do now is we need to put the saddle in. So, this is the saddle, right? This is the new location for the rear end. Now, I have decided, and then this is gonna go actually on top like this. That's why it's got the bolt in it. U-bolts are gonna go over that. And then your plate here will be on the bottom. But I have chosen to do a helper bag setup on this. And so we need to put this in at the same time we're doing the rest of this. So this, first of all, we have to bolt this on. So 14 millimeter, you need to snug it down and it needs to be parallel. See those holes right there need to be parallel with that guy. So we've got that in there, and then this goes over that alignment pin in the bottom. And we'll have to, we just kind of have to throw it down on the ground there. But we need to push it down, the bag down. It can bend for now, it's fine. But we need to get that over that pin in the center. But other than that, we also need to get this guy over that pin. So you have two things that we're trying to sandwich down. Now here's the other deal. We need to really be doing this at the same time on both sides, because when we release the pressure to get the rear end in place, we don't want to be snugging one side down, the other side be loose, if that makes sense. We kind of want to make sure that everything's centering up at the same time. You can see we've now got the U-bolts in. I've got that bottom plate on. You need to make sure that that lines up. See the hole in the center? The most important thing though, guys, is making sure that dowel lines up in the saddle, right? So the narrow part of the saddle goes in the back, the thicker part goes in the front. Essentially, we're pulling the rear end back since it's going lower. If that makes sense, we're not shortening the drive shaft. But one thing I did on this one, which I've never done before, is I use my clamp right here to clamp this. And the reason why I did that is a lot of times your dowel in the center is not thick enough to want to go through both of these until it's smashed down. So I clamped this together, making that nice and flat. And then we were able to negotiate the rear end into the spot here, put the U-bolts on. We got the top plate on, as you can see. Put the U-bolts on, got the bottom plate on, and snugged the bolts up. So at this point, it's actually together. Your pinion angle should be correct. It's built into the actual notch. So airbag bottom brackets in. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the top bracket. There's not much to it. It just sandwiches around here. And then we have obviously bolts and our air fitting, but let me go grab it and I'll show you guys it. So the the bag mount is literally just a frame sandwich, right? So it goes here, right in front of this guy. I think it's fitting up against, yeah, it's fitting right in between the notch. Of course, this is a McGaughy's notch. Then you have a backing plate, and then he's got the bolts in his hands that we're gonna use to sandwich this together. Now, once we get that sandwiched around the frame, I was underneath with a 3/4 inch wrench on the back. He tightened them down from the front. Now we're using our 14 millimeters to thread in with a lock washer and a regular washer. And we've also got the air fitting started. These are 14 millimeter. What size is that? What? 9/16 on the air fitting. So we'll get that snug down and then go to the other side and do the same thing. And we'll be all finished with the bags, other than obviously we got to route the line and figure out where we want to put the fill. Now that we've got the bracket bolted on, we've moved on to the shock extensions. And the shock extensions are a little bit unique in the way that they're designed. You have two bolts that hold it to the factory shock mount, and then we do have to drill a hole here on the bottom for a third bolt to keep it in place. But once we do that, we can go ahead and grab our McGaughy shock. We can use the factory hardware to put it up top and the factory bolt to put it in the bottom. But I'm gonna drill a hole here real quick. We'll get this all snugged down. And guys, we're getting really close to setting this thing on the ground in the back. I have not ran the airline jet. We will do that later, but I just want to set it on the ground. I want to see the work. As you can see, we've got our 21 back up top with the new McGaughy strut or shock, whatever you want to call it. We still have to put, I need to bolt that brake line. Remember the 13 millimeter. I need to bolt it back up top here in just a little bit. Also, obviously, I'll probably do that about the same time I run the air lines. But for now, we're gonna go whip this out on the other side. We're gonna sweep underneath, and we're gonna put the wheels on and set her down. So we're getting it off the jack stands here. And woo-wee. Are you off?
No.
This thing's low. Careful. We're gonna set it down and see what we got. I'm gonna have him set it down. I'm gonna step back and look while he's dropping it. I mean, it's pretty obvious right now what's going down. Real slow. Woo-wee. Man, we should probably just leave it like this. Like a donk. This is the style now. The back dragging. Woo! All right. Well, there we have it. Now we got some more stuff to do. Obviously, we got to hook up the airlines. I've got to put some stuff on the frame. We got to do the front. But man, it's gonna look good. We're about ready to torque everything down. You can see I've got it on my stands. I went ahead and put the hitch back in place. Guys, I didn't torque it because it's not the factory one. I just snugged all the bolts down snug. But I did run the airlines. So you can see I put my valve right here on the license plate. I had to make the hole just a hair bigger in order to fit that, but we've got the cap on. I've actually got about 60 PSI in them right now. And I was able to do this without taking the wheel off. You can see they're full, but this is just a plug-in line. So we've got it plugged in here. We routed it away from the exhaust or any heat under the frame. And I'm gonna try to show you guys underneath, and then I'm gonna pull back and let the air out so you can see it cycle. But you can see, you know, they're filled up. I went up there, you can see it up against the bed. I went at the very top against the line that runs. You can see the line there. I think that's for the tail lights actually. Went all the way to the other side, and here's where I put my T fitting in. You can see the T, and then from the T, obviously it goes out to the license plate where you can see it there. Same situation on the other side. I did zip tie to the bed in a couple places just to keep it, you know, from flopping out to the tire. But it's all plugged in and working. So, like I said, we're gonna torque some stuff down, but I wanna show you, I'm gonna let this air out of this thing. Let me see if I can do it while the camera's on. It's still pretty low, even with 60 PSI in there. It's gonna be a little noisy here, guys. Let's see if we can let it down to, I don't know, maybe 10 from the 60. Okay, it's got about 50 in it. That's about 20. And you generally want to leave about 10 in them. That's 10 right there. So pretty big difference. I may show you a little more down the, when we get a little further, but I've bounced up and down the suspension, and now we're gonna get under there. We'll talk about what torque specs, what things need to be torqued to. So with weight on this thing, obviously that's why I have it on these stands, we need to do the top and the bottom of the shock. That's gonna go to 85 foot-pounds. We need to do the U-bolts to 74. I always like to test those after a drive or two and go back and re-torque them. So the U-bolts down there, 74. The leaf spring. So remember we didn't take this one out, but we loosened it. The front of the leaf spring up here where we loosened it needs to go to 148. And then back here in the back, so the back of the leaf spring, at the very top where the leaf spring connects up here to the shackle, that one needs to go to 70. And then the bottom one where it connects to the body needs to go to 37. So I know there's several different torque specs there, but 74 on the U-bolts, 85 on the top and the bottom of the shocks, 140 on the front of the leaf spring, where it's closest to the cab, 70 on the top where the leaf spring hooks to that shackle, 37 on the bottom. Hopefully that all makes sense. We're gonna whip that out real quick and we will be finished with the back. One other thing before we pull this out, clean up, turn it around and work on the front, guys, I forgot to tell you, do not forget to put your 13s back in that hold the brake line bracket up here. They're still there above the C-notch. And then that one that we pulled out that hold our e-brake cables. Now we can get the wheel on, torque the wheel down, everything's torqued in the back, and we're gonna flip it around and work on the front. We got it flipped around. I've got it supported by both jack stands and jacks. Obviously we've got the wheels off. So guys, we are replacing just about every single thing on the front of this truck. The only thing that's gonna remain will be the top of the strut, the spring, and the brakes. I'll probably do a brake upgrade later. These brakes look like they're in dire need of replacement. I noticed that it's missing the Oh, well, there it is. Never mind. But either way, we need to get this stuff apart. So here's what I did. I went ahead and sprayed WD-40 on every single thing we're going to be taking apart. So the uppers, the 18 millimeters there, the tie rod, or the tie rod up there, the upper and lower ball joints, the sway bar end link, the lower A-arms, the upper A-arms. I went through and sprayed each one of those with WD-40. And now I'm going to let them set for a minute. Oh, the 15 millimeters that are down there on the strut, got those sprayed as well. Basically everything we're going to be taking apart. I've noticed that a lot of this stuff is worn. I know those bushings have to be shot. I can see cracks in the bushings on the bottom, but we're going to start right here with the brake. Like I said, I'm not going to be replacing the brake, but we're going to go ahead and get the 19 millimeters out of this, the 18 out of the caliper bracket. Then we'll be able to get the caliper. I'm just going to hang it over here on the frame for now. I've got a bungee cord over here to hang it so we're not putting stress on the brake line. The other thing we'll have to do is there's a 10 millimeter right here that we'll have to take out, as well as on top of the spindle. We'll get those out real quick and get this unplugged and have this kind of all out of the way. Went ahead, unhooked this guy as well. You can see I've got the brake tied up, but I took the 15 millimeter out of the back that hold the hub assembly in place. Now we are replacing the hub assembly, but I'd like to have my dust shield. So normally you could just toss all this, but I'm gonna attempt to use my dust shield anyway. So I am gonna have to hammer this guy out of here. Guys, this is generally pretty stiff if you're not replacing this, but obviously I am. And I'll list all this stuff in the description like always, but I think this dust shield kind of helps cut down on some of the junk that gets into the brakes. So I'm gonna see, you know, I may or may not use it, but I am gonna knock this apart now that I got those 15s out. But the next thing I'm gonna tackle is the 15s in the bottom of this, since I already have it on, and our sway bar end link. That should all be 15 millimeter. Now you can use a ratcheting 18 to get the upper strut bolts from right here. I don't really like doing that. I'd rather come up here. We've got gobs of room. You can see them right down there. So we're gonna use a long extension with an 18 and get those off. Just a nut. So there's 3 nuts on the top of the strut. Get it off, and then we'll work on the ball joints and the tie rod end. Now, one of the things I've done before I take the 21 loose, since we are going to be replacing the outer tie rod, I went ahead and got a wrench and loosened this up, right? And so I want to keep that adjustment nut right where it's at so we can get it as close as possible. We're still going to have to get it aligned, but you know, I've got a 30-mile drive to the alignment shop, so I don't want it to completely scrub off tires. We're going to go ahead now that we got that loose. And this is a 21 millimeter. We're gonna knock that loose. And honestly, guys, I was sitting here thinking, since I'm replacing the spindle, the uppers and lowers, I don't know that I'll spend the time to take this stuff apart, because once I get the strut out of place, I could just drop the lower A-arms, upper A-arms, and it could all stay together, honestly. Couple hits with the hammer. This guy's loose. And guys, look, I'm replacing it so we can be really rough. I'm replacing all this. But one thing I will tell you, we have to use the spring, have to use the top hat. Go ahead and take the strut out. You can push this down and thread the strut out, which you can see I've done here. You're gonna have to spray this with some WD-40 and let it set. I'm going to go ahead and continue disassembling, going to the A-arms obviously at this point, but I'm gonna keep spraying this maybe every couple minutes, because that is going to fight you. Just wait, I'm telling you. But either way, we'll get that sprayed down and then we'll move on. I think the outers on this, if I remember, are a different size than the inners on the lower. And I may just go ahead and take the spindle off. I don't know, we'll just see. The tops, I believe, are 21 or 22. I don't remember. I'll come back with the size here in just a second, but I'm almost positive the bottoms are different sizes. Now, with that being said, you'll also notice they're different widths. So we need to make sure that when we take the lower A-arm bolts out, for one, you have enough room for them to swing, but two, we need to make sure that we position them in the way that they came out. So the threaded end is pointing back towards the back of the truck on both of them. The other thing is this one is smaller, that one's bigger. Up top, it's not as big a deal, but I am going to mark, if you guys see where this is indexed, I'm going to mark that both on the camber plate or the eccentric here and the actual piece here itself, so the part of the truck. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to try to get it as close to, you know, back to where it was at. In order to do that, we're going to have to pop this out on this other side. those have been there since the beginning. Well, this one's almost gone, but I'm assuming this truck has never been aligned, or they were able to get it into spec. That generally means it's never been aligned. Well, as you can see, I did go ahead and take the spindle off. I just thought it'd be less to hassle with trying to get all that out of there at one time. This one has had a ball joint replacement, I could tell, because it's not pressed in. It's got a keeper. So the bottom size is normally like 24 on a stock one. The upper is an 18. Obviously, once you loosen those, tap them with the hammer. And I'm tapping them on the stud just to kind of loosen them up. You don't want to tap too hard. You'll mushroom out the end and it won't go through the hole. But ultimately, guys, you can be a little bit more rough or use a pickle fork to separate them. Either way. So on to the lowers. I'm going to take those out first because I need to mark these up top. 18 millimeter on the outside, or on the nut, or on the, sorry, the bolt. On the inside, I'm just using my adjustable end wrench because with my impact, they'll just whip right out of there. And then, like I said, there's two different sizes, so make sure you keep them separate. One other thing you might want to pay attention to, because sometimes it sticks, is there is a washer on the nut side of that lower control arm. So, and it's kind of bent to set kind of in a spot in the back. So make sure that that bend is going in, if that makes sense. So just like this is aligned here. Anyway, just wanted to show you guys that. We'll get this out of the way now. You can see where I've got them marked, or hopefully you guys can see that. I've marked on both sides, all four. So now I've got my 21 up there, 21 on the inside. The inside shouldn't spin. So you just have to undo the 21 millimeter here on the outside. Once you do that, make sure that you're placing these, you know, don't mix up side to side, and then don't mix up front and back. Since we've marked them, we want to try to keep them in place. So I'm going to take this one out, set it to the side up front, take this one out, set it to the side in the back, then we'll have our A-arm out of the way. We now have everything completely off, other than obviously we've got to unscrew the outer tie rod, but I like to take this time to use a little brake clean on a rag and clean the pockets where the new A-arms are going to be mounting. Chances are there's not a ton of dirt in there, but I like to just clean them out, make sure there's nothing going to cause any issues, make any sounds, any noises, just something that I've always done. So I'm just going to do that real quick, and then we will grab some new parts and go back together. Before we go back together, there's a couple things I want to do. For one, I've got the new A-arm, lower A-arm sitting here. I cleaned off the bolts that go both in the lower and the upper. I put them right back together in the same spot. So you see the ones that go in the back, the ones that go in the front. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the outer. So right here and here. And then we will get that thing into place. Remember, putting the bolts with the threads facing back on both the bottom ones. On the top one, however, they go the opposite ways. So the threads point this way on that one and the other way on the back one. So let's get both the A-arms in place. I'm going to put grease on both of them. So you guys will see, you may see a little bit of grease. I think that's a good idea, both the top and the bottom. And we'll just get them, we're just getting the bolts in at this point. Got both those in, no issues whatsoever. Actually went in really easy. But I've got the bolts just snug. We still have a ton of play. You can see that arm's all the way down. You do not want to tighten at this point. We got to put weight on the suspension, but I'm going to go ahead, take off my old tie rod end, old worn out. And you notice that I only cracked that. We're going to try to keep it in that same spot. Now, whether that happens or not, you know, we're going to try. Got our new one from Moog here that we are going to put on. And we're going to just thread it right up to that point where it starts to stop, maybe one turn back. That'll get us really, really close. And then what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm still letting those set. I've been letting them set for a couple hours now. I'm spraying them like every 10 minutes because I really think that's going to cause us some problems. I'm going to back that off one, pointing down, and then we'll snug that up against it here in just a little bit. But I'm going to get a jack stand. We're going to put a jack stand under this. So we've got, you know, kind of an up out of the way. You can see I've done it on the other side. And the reason why is I want to go ahead and put our spindle in place. Now that our jack stand's there, I've got the spindle here. Here's what I like to do. I like to start the bottom one first, and this is just kind of holding it up so I have, you know, we're not fighting a bunch of stuff. We need to thread the bottom one in first, and then we'll set the top one into it. And then we'll just loosely snug that up for now. And then I'll probably go ahead and torque them, because it doesn't hurt to torque these with no load on the suspension. Got it in there. We're gonna go ahead and torque the top to 37. You may have to swing just a hair past. It's recessed, so you can barely see it up there. May have to swing a hair past to get the cotter key or cotter pin in. On the bottom, it's 92, and it's 7/8 on the bottom. It's actually 11/16 on the top if you're using the same parts that I'm listing in the description as far as replacement A-arms. It is not metric. Now that we got both those torqued, I'm gonna go ahead and put this stud into place. You don't have enough room to get the factory third bolt here. So they supply you, McGoffey's, or McGoy's, I don't know why I say that. I hear people say it wrong all the time. But either way, they give you this stud, and this stud needs to be installed at 25 foot-pounds. So I'm using, I don't remember what this is, a 6mm. So I'm gonna grab my torque wrench, we're gonna torque this to 25, and then we're gonna grab our bolts, but we need to trim a little. So on this guy, because we're gonna grab our new hub assembly, so on this, because I wanna keep this, we need to trim the bottom section here. I'll try to show you, let's put it up into place, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like or where we need to trim. So basically what needs trimmed is this area right here. So you need to go straight down and make that straight. And I want to keep this, that's why I took that apart. So we'll torque that to 25. I'm going to take this out and cut this section off, and then we will grab the two stock bolts, and they supply a nut for the top here. You can see what I'm talking about, the area that I cut off here. So we're going to go ahead, thread two of these bolts in the bottom. And I've got my new hub sitting here. You just got to make sure that your wiring goes out the same area that it came out before, which is this corner. So you'll have to sneak that through. And then guys, we need to torque these. These down here, the factory ones, go to 133 foot-pounds. I'm going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on them. This top one, I'm going to put just a little bit of Loctite on it, not much. And I'm also going to use blue, and it goes to 75. You're going to have to use a crow's foot to tighten this one. These down here, you'll have to do with a 15 from the back. This is actually 3/4 now, the nut that goes on this, but I'll show you once we're all together. Got that torque down to 133. That is a lot on those 15s, but in order to make our wiring fit the way it's supposed to, we're gonna have to trim this as well. So you can see that it's interfering now because the brake had to move up. And so what we're going to do is we are gonna cut it right here. So this ear essentially will be completely gone. And then we'll have our other ear to hold our wiring that we just put in. And then we'll be able to put the rest of it in place. But I'm gonna cut this end off real quick. I will tell you that McGoy's gives you a new 10mm in case you forgot or lost your other one. So that's good. Got that cut bracket back in place, so we can go ahead and put our brake back on, our brake line, which we need to put our rotor, then our caliper bracket, all that. We'll get into torque specs on that here in just a minute, but I'm gonna reuse the stock bolts. They're laying back behind me here. Get the brakes all together, go ahead and plug this line in, and then I did go ahead and put the outer tie rod back into its place. We need to torque that guy to 44 foot-pounds real quick. Put our cotter pin in it, and then don't forget to put all your grease fittings in. Some of them come installed, like my lower, one of them had it, the other one didn't. These are all site specific other than the outer tie rod too, by the way. So these should be stamped with right hand or left hand side. I didn't even talk about that earlier, and I should have. Same with the spindles, guys. The spindles have to be in a certain spot. The hubs, however, they can go on either side. We got the brake in place. We got the line hooked up where it goes. There's a plastic clip. I need more light up here, guys, sorry. There's a plastic clip that was broken off actually on the old one, so it's back in its place. It comes with a new plastic clip for this. I put the 10mm in here, of course the one on top. Those torque to about 106 inch-pounds, if you wanna know. Besides that, we got the brake all put together, even though it looks ugly and I need to replace them. That's coming down the road, guys. But we need to torque the caliper guide bolts, so the 19 millimeters that actually go from the caliper to the bracket, and then the bracket. So the bracket itself, the 18 millimeters, they torque to 148. That is a lot. The guide bolts torque to 74. Seems like a lot as well, but we're gonna get those torqued. And then, guys, we are finished for the most part. We still gotta put our sway bar end link in, which I'm not gonna worry about right now because I really need this movement in order to get the new struts in. But we are going to disassemble the old struts. Now they've been setting and sprayed a bunch of times. That is our next step after torquing the brakes down. For this part, this is the this is the most fun. I've been putting this off. But we have to get the spring. We have to obviously have the spring for the new strut. And we have to have this top hat. So we need to take this apart to get the old strut out and to put the new lowering strut in. In order to do that, you're gonna have to have some sort of spring compressor, whether you have one that mounts to the wall, which I kind of wish I had, honestly. This one, it takes a 3/4 inch socket and you just go back and forth until you get some play here. The spring starts to pull together. And so I'm just gonna go back and forth. Now you could do this by hand, guys, but I definitely recommend using an impact on this guy. And once we do that, then we have to break that top nut loose. That's what I've been spraying and spraying and spraying, this guy here. If I remember right, it's a 15, but we'll check. And I wanna make sure I have a fresh battery because I wanna zap it one time and it come out. Because if it sticks or you stop, generally you're gonna have an issue. But let's get this tightened up some more. I like to leave a little bit of tension on it because that helps push that nut off the top if it does get stuck, but we will see. Got this thing clamped down. I generally like to put my foot on it just in case it decides to shoot out. It's actually an 18 millimeter, guys. Let's see if we can get it, well, hopefully it doesn't shoot through the side of my garage. All right. I think letting that set for a long time really helps, guys. So once we do that, we need to pull this whole thing apart and I'll show you the various pieces. These are the components when you pull it apart. So you've got your strut, no longer using. We've got our top hat, which we will be using. And then we have obviously our spring and the rest of that top piece. So here's what we need to do. We've got a strut here that allows you to get different amounts of drop based on the amount of rings that you put in. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pull that old bump stop out of that top hat and we're gonna be using this bump stop. You can put it directly on the shaft up here, but we're gonna do this first. So what we need to do is we need to put this on. And if you wanted, let's say you wanted, we got 2 inches of drop obviously from the spindle, but you could go up to an additional 3 inches of drop just with these rings. If you wanted no drop, you'd use all 6 rings. All 6 rings would now go on there. And I say that, it actually goes on before you put this on. So I just told you guys wrong here. So I'm going to go for a 2.5 inch drop, which means I will only use one of these rings. And so we're gonna put one ring on, just like that. And then we are going to grab, if I can do this without dropping it, we're gonna grab that spring pocket. And that should be 2.5 inches of drop. If I added another one, it should be 2 inches. They're basically 1/2 inch increments. So now what we need to do is we need to grab that piece of plastic, kind of keeps debris and stuff out of the top of the strut. We'll put it on, which I'll have to, let's unscrew this first. You have a new, obviously, top bolt. So let's get this on, which goes on like this. And like I said, it's just to keep debris out of the top of the strut. Let me see that. We're gonna have to sneak it past this guy here in just a second. There's a collar right here that stops the top hat. So we'll get it on, and then this goes facing up, not like that one. And then we'll kind of sandwich it all back together. We're ready to go back together. Obviously, just the reverse of what we did before. The only thing I will tell you guys is try to keep, this is the middle of what's facing out when you put this strut in. So it's nice if you have these facing parallel with that, if that makes sense. You can generally turn it once you get it in there, but it's more of a hassle. So I'm just trying to save you guys some time here, but try to put it back together in that manner. That makes life a lot easier for you. The top hat, by the way, will only fit one way, so you'll see when you start putting stuff back together that it's only going to go in a certain area. They are offset just a little bit, but now we need to just zip this back together, and that's pretty much it. Release the pressure off this. Once we get it all assembled, tightened down, we are ready to put this thing in. So here's the situation. We need to reuse these pieces that came off the bottom of the old strut. So don't throw that away. And then of course the 18 millimeters that hold the top in. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna thread it up in here. I'm gonna start the 18s up top. I've relaxed the suspension. You can see that I've moved my jack stand out. And so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. I'm gonna start those by hand here in the fender. We'll probably torque them from under the hood. But for now, let's get this thing in here. One of the last things we need to put in before we start torquing, you know, the A-arms and whatnot is I bought Energy Suspension sway bar end links. And so I like to leave these loose on both sides, put them in at the same time. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this guy in, and then we are going to come back and start torquing this. I like to lift on the bottom of the A-arm and torque the A-arms, because guys, there's not a lot of room to do this unless you had it, you know, if I had it on my 4-post, it'd be a little bit easier to torque things, but we're gonna line up our marks back where they go, and but I'll just show you here in a minute once we get the sway bar end link in and a jack under this thing. Now I temporarily got the jack on that bottom ball joint, and I'm just doing that until I can tighten the 15 millimeters here for the bottom of the strut. Those go to 37, and so do the top. Now the top we can do once we drop the thing on the ground with the tires, but for now I want to get this at 37, and then I'm going to move a wooden block back here right behind the spindle, and we're going to lift it up in order to get torque on the upper and lower A-arms. I started by torquing the sway bar end link. Once I have this, now here's what I've done. I've lifted it with a block and a jack, just because this jack doesn't go high enough, just to where it comes off the jack stand and the jack. Then we know that the suspension's fully compressed. So got 37 on the bottom of the strut, 37 on the top, which, like I said, you can do the last 37 once it's on the ground. But now we need to line up, we need to take our 21 millimeter. Oh, by the way, I torqued that to 17 foot-pounds, the sway bar end link. But we need to take this guy and adjust our lines to where they line up. So it's a 21 millimeter, remember? We're gonna move this around until they line up, and then we are going to cinch them down 140 foot-pounds, and you are tightening the nut, which is good because it's on the outside. And then on the bottom, guys, 129 foot-pounds on the nut, which is gonna be a little more cumbersome because we're gonna have to find the right size and put an 18 on the front. I think it's 15/16 will actually fit it. So we'll get that done. And then we'll go do this on the other side. And then all we have to do after that is set it down. We're gonna torque those 18s last up top at 37 and really put the wheels on. Oh, make sure you put grease in all your grease fittings. So here, your lower and your tie rod end, if you replace those, not a bad idea to do it even if you didn't, but that's it. We're gonna set this thing down and take a look at it next. It's definitely lower. I forgot to measure this thing before we started, guys. But here's what I'm gonna do. I need to tighten those 18s under the hood real quick. And then once I get that done, I'm gonna drive it in and out and down the road, make sure I don't have any noises or any kind of issues. I need to torque those wheels down too. But we'll pull it back in the garage and take a look at it, because I think it's gonna settle some. I did adjust, I put the camber and stuff back where we had it before, but I did adjust the tie rod in a little bit to pull the wheels in. They were both kind of facing out, so I did adjust that. All you have to do is undo that jam nut and thread more of that rod into it, which pulls the front of the wheel in. That's what I did. Then I locked that jam nut back down. I didn't talk about that earlier, but I forgot to. But either way, let's get it going down the road, make sure that we don't have any noises or crazy stuff going on. And I gotta clean up all my mess. I gotta torque those 18s, and then we'll take a look at it once we get back. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is quickly becoming one of my favorite looking trucks in this garage. I have always had a soft spot for these trucks lowered. The GMC front end on these, just the way, I've never been a fan of the Silverado, even though I've had a couple, just because the way the headlights shaped and the fender. On the GMC, they've got that kind of built-in fender scoop or fender flare, you would call it. I just think this truck looks so good. It's amazing what a drop
and wheels will do to a truck. So guys, we took it down the road. There was no noises. It rode better than it ever has. But look, it needed ball joints. It needed bushings. It was squeaking and making some popping noises. All that's gone now, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Look, the setting that we have, it had those aftermarket shackles in the back. That was a drop shackle. They were junk. That was part of my noise. But we put those stock ones back in. This is a 7-inch in the back. I set it at 4.5 in the front. So we got 2 inches from the spindle. I went with a 2.5-inch drop on the strut. Now we could go another 1/2 inch if we took that ring out for a 5-inch drop in the front, and then we could put a shackle in the back and bring it down another. But this is perfect for, like, he's gonna be using it to haul a lawn mowing trailer, and that's why I put the helper bags in. I probably would have put them in either way, but we're gonna use it as a truck, and it doesn't hit any bumps. There's no, I mean, as far as the bump stops, I've not hit the bump stops on a couple bumps that I hit. I still have to get it aligned. Like I said, I kind of spot aligned it, and it's pretty close, but you're always gonna have to get an alignment afterwards. But like I said, it is quickly becoming a favorite. It's a toss-up really on the outside looks of this truck versus the green truck. Now, I still like the NBS, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, guys. These trucks ride better than the NBS lowered, I will tell you that. I think it has to do with it being more of a coilover setup in the front than a coil and separated spring on like the NBS. But you know, I could always do a coilover conversion on the green truck, and maybe I'll do that down the road. But my son was out here yesterday seeing me. He helped me in the back, but he was mowing and stuff. He actually had to borrow my dad's truck to mow because we were using this. But he came out here and said, well, maybe we should V8 swap this truck. And so it starts. I don't know whether we will or not, but we do have a lot of other little things planned for this, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. Like I said, I'll list all the components I used down in the description, but yeah, we've got several little things. We need to do headlights. We've got some pieces of paint getting painted. Obviously you can see the mirror caps are gone. So we're gonna be putting those on very soon. We got new door handle or new hinges. There's a lot of stuff that I want to do, just little stuff as we go. But if you did enjoy this video, guys, please, like always, smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are not subscribed, of course, go down there, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell notification. That way you're notified every time we drop a new video, and stay tuned to see what we do to this truck next.